The fluorescent lights in Pinnacle Marketing's Chicago headquarters hummed their usual Tuesday morning tune as I walked through the maze of standing desks and beanbag chairs. The open office concept was supposed to foster collaboration, but mostly it just amplified every keyboard click and coffee slurp into a symphony of distraction. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My workspace sat in the corner, not the prestigious corner office kind, but the forgotten about it corner where they stuck the people who asked too many questions. 3 monitors displayed spreadsheets that would make most people's eyes glaze over, but to me, they told a story. A story of patterns, inefficiencies, and opportunities that everyone else seemed determined to ignore. Sarah, conference room B in 5 minutes. The voice belonged to Rachel Morrison, our VP of Strategy. Her heels clicked across the polished concrete with the precision of a metronome, each step announcing her arrival long before you saw her perfectly straightened blonde hair and power suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I saved my work, a comprehensive analysis of our client retention algorithms that had taken me 3 weeks to compile. 3 weeks of staying late, of diving deep into data that most of the team considered good enough at surface level. But surface level had never been good enough for me, not since my statistics professor at Northwestern had drilled into us that the devil lived in the details. Conference room B smelled like the kind of expensive air freshener that was supposed to make you feel calm but somehow made me more anxious. Rachel sat across from me, her laptop open to what looked like a prepared presentation. Red flag number 1. Prepared presentations for one-on-one meetings meant someone had made a decision before you walked in the room. Sarah, I want to start by saying your dedication hasn't gone unnoticed, Rachel began, her tone carrying that particular corporate cadence that preceded bad news. Your attention to detail is thorough. Thorough. In corporate speak, thorough was code for problematic. I'd heard it before, usually followed by words like efficiency and practical timelines. However, she continued, clicking to the next slide, we need to talk about your working style. The Henderson Electronics campaign you turned in last week, while technically impressive, raised some concerns with the team. I thought about the Henderson project. A mid-tier electronics company wanted to expand their market share among millennials. Most of the team had suggested the usual playbook: social media ads, influencer partnerships, maybe some targeted Google campaigns. Standard stuff that would have gotten standard results, but I'd dug deeper. I'd analyzed purchasing patterns across 17 different demographics, cross-referenced them with social media engagement data, studied the psychological triggers that drove electronics purchases in the 25 to 40 age range. I discovered that Henderson's target audience didn't just want electronics, they wanted to feel like early adopters, like they were part of an exclusive community discovering the next big thing before everyone else. My strategy had involved creating a sense of scarcity and insider knowledge, using micro-targeted campaigns that made each customer feel personally selected. Instead of casting a wide net, we'd use surgical precision to create brand evangelists who would do the heavy lifting of word-of-mouth marketing. The concern, Rachel said, advancing to a slide titled Team Feedback, is that you're overthinking these projects. Marcus from the creative team said you asked him to revise the Henderson visuals 4 times because the color psychology wasn't optimized for conversion rates. The blues they were using tested 23% lower for trust metrics in electronics purchases. I said, that could have meant the difference between a successful campaign and a mediocre one. Rachel's smile had the warmth of a Chicago winter. Sarah, that level of analysis isn't always necessary. Sometimes good enough is good enough. We need to be agile, responsive. When you spend 3 weeks analyzing color psychology, you're missing opportunities to move fast and iterate. But what if moving fast means moving in the wrong direction? That's exactly the kind of overthinking I'm talking about. She leaned forward, her voice taking on a tone I'd heard teachers use with particularly stubborn children. You're brilliant, Sarah. No one's questioning your intelligence. But intelligence without practical application isn't valuable in our fast-paced environment. Fast-paced environment. Another corporate euphemism. What she meant was, we don't have time for your questions, your deep dives, your inconvenient insights that might require us to change course. The feedback from the team is unanimous, Rachel continued. While they respect your analytical skills, they feel your tendency to overcomplicate simple projects is slowing down momentum. Jenny mentioned that the Morrison Incorporated proposal took 6 revisions because you kept finding new angles to explore. Jenny, our senior strategist, believed that if a campaign couldn't be explained in a 30-second elevator pitch, it was too complex. Jenny, who had never met a status quo she didn't want to maintain. Every angle I explored increased the projected ROI, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The final Morrison proposal was projected to deliver 340% better results than the initial version. Projected results aren't guaranteed results, Rachel replied. And the time cost of your analysis meant we missed the window for 2 other potential clients who went with more responsive agencies. Responsive. There was that word again. In the agency world, responsive meant saying yes quickly, delivering something decent fast, and hoping for the best. It meant prioritizing speed over strategy, good enough over great. I understand your point about efficiency, I said, but what about the Henderson results? The campaign I overthought delivered a 287% increase in their quarterly sales. Their social media engagement went up 450%. They signed a contract extension worth $2.3 million. Rachel paused, and for a moment, I thought I might have broken through. Then she clicked to the next slide, performance improvement plan. The Henderson results were impressive, she acknowledged, but they're not sustainable if the process to get there disrupts team cohesion. We can't have one person holding up entire campaigns because they need to analyze every possible variable. Team cohesion. The sacred cow of corporate culture. The idea that everyone should work at the same pace, think at the same level, accept the same limitations. God forbid someone should dig deeper, ask harder questions, or suggest that maybe, just maybe, we could do better than good enough. Sarah, I'm placing you on a performance improvement plan. The goal is to help you develop more efficient working methods. You'll work with Jenny to streamline your analytical processes and focus on deliverables that meet deadlines without unnecessary complexity. Unnecessary complexity. Each word hit like a small betrayal. Everything I'd learned in my statistics master's program, every late night spent understanding market psychology, every insight that had made our campaigns more successful, all of it reduced to unnecessary complexity. You'll have 90 days to demonstrate that you can work within our established timelines and team expectations. Jenny will provide weekly feedback on your progress. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I stared at the PIP document she slid across the table. Performance improvement plans were corporate purgatory, a waiting room for people on their way out. Everyone knew it. The statistics were brutal, less than 30% of people placed on PIP survived them. Do you have any questions? I had 1,000 questions. I wanted to ask why efficiency mattered more than effectiveness. I wanted to know when fast enough had become more important than right. I wanted to understand how an industry built on understanding human behavior had become so afraid of actually understanding human behavior. Instead, I said, I understand. Because in that moment, I realized something that would change everything. Rachel wasn't firing me for overthinking. She was firing me for thinking at all. The back at my desk, the Henderson Electronics case study file sat open on my second monitor. 287% sales increase. 450% social media engagement growth. $2.3 million contract extension. Numbers that should have been cause for celebration, not a performance improvement plan. I minimized the file and opened my personal folder, the one I kept for projects that interested me but didn't fit into Pinnacle's efficient workflow. Inside were dozens of analyses I'd done in my spare time, deep dives into consumer behavior patterns that had been nagging at me for months, the retail therapy paradox, the subscription fatigue phenomenon, the authenticity gap in influencer marketing. Each folder contained weeks of research that painted a picture of an industry that was rapidly missing the mark on what consumers actually wanted. My phone buzzed. A text from my grad school friend Marcus Chen, who now worked at McKinsey. Drinks tonight? I've got something interesting to run by you. Marcus had always been the one who saw around corners in our Northwestern classes. While the rest of us were learning frameworks and formulas, he was questioning why the frameworks existed in the first place. If anyone would understand what I was going through, it would be him. The bar in River North was the kind of place where young professionals went to complain about their jobs while secretly hoping to be overheard by someone who might offer them a better one. Marcus was already there when I arrived, his laptop bag at his feet, the universal signal of someone who never really stopped working. You look like someone just told you Santa Claus isn't real, he said as I slid into the booth. Worse. Someone told me my brain isn't compatible with corporate efficiency standards. I told him about the PIP, about Rachel's feedback, about the way my analytical approach had somehow become a liability instead of an asset. Marcus listened with the focused attention that had made him one of the youngest consultants at McKinsey, occasionally nodding or raising an eyebrow at particularly absurd details. Let me guess, he said when I finished. They want you to work faster, think less, and deliver campaigns that are good enough instead of actually good. Exactly. Apparently, Asking why consumers behave a certain way is overthinking. Understanding the psychological triggers behind purchasing decisions is unnecessary complexity. Marcus pulled out his laptop. Can I show you something? But first, promise me you'll keep this confidential. The screen displayed a presentation titled, The Attention Economy Crisis, Why Traditional Marketing is Failing. The McKinsey logo sat in the corner, along with a date 3 weeks in the future. This is going to the Fortune 500 next month, Marcus said. We've been tracking marketing effectiveness across industries, and the results are pretty damning. Traditional campaigns, the kind that prioritize speed and broad reach, are seeing diminishing returns across the board. Consumer attention spans aren't shorter, they're more selective. People are tuning out generic messaging and responding only to campaigns that feel personally relevant. He clicked to a chart that made my stomach drop. Conversion rates for standard social media campaigns have dropped 67% in the past 2 years. Customer acquisition costs have tripled. But here's the interesting part: campaigns that demonstrate deep behavioral understanding, that target psychological triggers rather than just demographic data, are outperforming traditional approaches by margins of 300% or more. That sounds familiar, I said, thinking about Henderson Electronics. It should. The methodologies you're describing, the deep behavioral analysis, the psychological trigger mapping, the multivariable testing, that's exactly what we're recommending to clients. We call it precision behavioral targeting, and it's about to become the industry standard. I stared at the presentation. Everything I'd been doing, every analysis that had earned me a PIP, was sitting on Marcus's screen as the future of marketing. The problem, Marcus continued, is that most agencies can't execute this approach because they don't have analysts who understand both the psychological and statistical components. They're stuck in the old model of casting wide nets and hoping for decent hit rates. So what you're telling me is that my overthinking is actually the solution to the industry's biggest problem. I'm telling you that what Pinnacle calls overthinking, the rest of the industry is going to call survival. Companies that don't adapt to precision behavioral targeting are going to get left behind. Marcus closed his laptop and leaned back. Which brings me to why I wanted to talk to you. McKinsey is launching a new practice focused on behavioral analytics for marketing. We need someone who understands both the statistical models and the practical application. Someone who's already been doing this work. The offer hung in the air between us. A chance to escape Pinnacle's efficiency-focused culture and work somewhere that valued depth over speed. It was tempting, incredibly tempting. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I'm not ready to give up on changing things from the inside. Maybe Pinnacle just needs to see the results speak for themselves. Marcus raised his eyebrows. You really think you can convince them? I think I have 90 days to try. 3 weeks into my performance improvement plan, the cracks were starting to show. Jenny had assigned me to 3 simple campaigns: a local restaurant chain, a fitness app startup, and a boutique clothing brand. Each brief came with explicit instructions to keep the analysis surface level and deliver proposals within 1 week, but old habits die hard, and good analysts can't help themselves. The restaurant chain wanted to increase foot traffic among young professionals. The standard approach would have been location-based ads during lunch hours and happy hour specials promoted through social media. Instead, I noticed something in their customer data that everyone else had missed. Their most loyal customers weren't coming for the food, they were coming for the Wi-Fi and quiet atmosphere during off-peak hours. The restaurant had accidentally become a co-working space for freelancers and remote workers who needed to escape coffee shop noise but couldn't afford actual co-working memberships. My proposal focused on embracing this accidental positioning. Instead of trying to compete with other restaurants for meal traffic, we'd market them as a productivity sanctuary with reliable internet, phone call-friendly booths, and work-friendly lighting. The campaign targeted freelancers, remote workers, and students with messaging about the workspace that feeds your success. Jenny's feedback was swift and negative. This is exactly what we talked about, Sarah. You've overanalyzed a simple restaurant campaign and turned it into something completely different. The client wants more customers, not a business model change. But then the results started coming in. The fitness app campaign had a similar story. Instead of the usual before and after testimonials and New Year resolution messaging, I dug into their user retention data and discovered something interesting. People weren't quitting the app because it was too hard, they were quitting because it was too easy to ignore. The most successful users were those who had connected their workouts to social accountability or competitive elements. But the app's interface buried these features under individual goal-setting tools that most users never explored. My campaign focused on workout accountability partnerships and friendly fitness challenges. Instead of promoting individual transformation, we promoted social connection through fitness. The messaging was about finding your workout buddy, joining community challenges, and celebrating group achievements. Jenny's response: again, you've complicated a straightforward fitness campaign. We're selling an app, not a social network. The boutique clothing campaign was the final straw. The client wanted to increase online sales among women 25 to 40. Standard approach: showcase the clothes, highlight quality and style, maybe add some lifestyle imagery, but their customer reviews told a different story. People weren't just buying clothes, they were buying confidence. The reviews were filled with stories about how a particular dress made someone feel powerful in a job interview, how a jacket gave them the courage to ask for a raise, how the right outfit helped them feel like the person they wanted to become. My campaign was built around the confidence collection, not selling clothes, but selling the feeling of becoming your best self. Each piece was presented with stories from real customers about moments when the right outfit had changed how they felt about themselves. Jenny called me into her office the next day. "Sarah, I've been reviewing your recent work, and I'm concerned that you're not internalizing the feedback from your PIP. Each of these campaigns shows the same pattern of overanalysis and unnecessary complexity that we discussed." She had printouts of my proposals spread across her desk like evidence in a trial. Red ink marked up every section where I deviated from standard approaches. The restaurant client specifically asked for a campaign to increase foot traffic. You gave them a positioning strategy. The fitness app wanted to promote their features. You created a social networking campaign. The clothing brand wanted to showcase their products. You turned it into a psychology experiment. But the results haven't come in yet, and even if they're positive, that doesn't justify the process. We can't have every campaign take 3 times longer because one person needs to reinvent the wheel every time. I looked at the red-marked papers and realized something that would have seemed impossible 3 weeks ago. Jenny genuinely believed that thinking deeper was a problem to be solved, not a skill to be developed. "I'm recommending to Rachel that we move to the final phase of your PIP," Jenny continued. "You'll have 2 weeks to deliver 3 campaigns using our standard methodologies. No deep analysis, no psychological frameworks, no behavioral targeting. Just clean, efficient work that meets our timelines. And if I can't? Then we'll have to consider whether Pinnacle is the right fit for your working style." That night, I sat in my Lincoln Park apartment with my laptop open to the campaigns I'd overthought. The restaurant proposal with its productivity sanctuary positioning. The fitness app with its social accountability focus. The clothing brand with its confidence-building messaging. Each one represented hours of analysis, pattern recognition, and insight development. Each one challenged conventional wisdom about what the client really needed. Each one was about to be measured against standards that valued speed over depth, compliance over creativity. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Offer still stands. We could use someone who understands that thinking isn't the enemy." I stared at the message for a long time before setting the phone aside. 2 weeks to prove that surface-level thinking could satisfy a deep-level thinker. 2 weeks to demonstrate that good enough was good enough for someone who'd built her career on the belief that better was always possible. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of traffic on Lakeshore Drive. Outside my window, Chicago's skyline reminded me that this city had been built by people who refused to accept that good enough was good enough. Every skyscraper represented someone's refusal to settle for what already existed. I opened a new document and began typing. Phase 2 analysis: why standard methodologies fail. If I was going down, I was going down with data. The email arrived on a Thursday morning, 2 days before my PIP evaluation meeting with Rachel and Jenny. The sender was David Rodriguez, owner of Milagros Restaurant Group, the client I'd supposedly overcomplicated with my productivity sanctuary campaign. "Sarah, I wanted to reach out personally to thank you for the campaign strategy. We've seen a 340% increase in off-peak hour revenue since implementing your recommendations. More importantly, we've discovered an entirely new business model we never knew we had. 3 other locations are now implementing the co-working-friendly concept, and we're in talks with a real estate developer about opening dedicated work-friendly locations. Would you be available for a consultation on our expansion strategy?" I read the email 3 times before it sank in. Then I checked the metrics dashboard for the other campaigns. The fitness app's social accountability campaign had increased user retention by 180% and boosted in-app purchase conversions by 220%. More telling was the user-generated content. People were posting workout completion photos with hashtags like #accountabilitypartner and #communitystrong. The app had accidentally become the social fitness platform I'd positioned it as. The boutique clothing campaign's confidence messaging had driven a 290% increase in online sales, but the real indicator was in the customer feedback. The reviews weren't about fabric quality or fit anymore, they were about how the clothes made people feel. This dress helped me nail my presentation. I got the promotion wearing this jacket. I finally feel like myself in these clothes. Each campaign had succeeded not despite my overthinking, but because of it. I forwarded the results to Marcus with a single line: "Turns out precision behavioral targeting works." His response came back within minutes: "Shocking. It's almost like understanding your customers leads to better results. Presentation to Fortune 500 is next week. Mind if I use some anonymized case studies?" "Use whatever you need." The morning of my PIP evaluation, I printed out the results and placed them in a folder labeled Performance Review Documentation. Rachel's office smelled the same as it had 6 weeks ago, expensive air freshener trying to mask the anxiety of corporate decisions. Jenny was already seated, a stack of papers in front of her that I recognized as my simplified campaign proposals. From the past 2 weeks. Standard social media strategies, generic messaging, broad demographic targeting, everything I'd been asked to deliver to prove I could work within established parameters. "Sarah, thank you for joining us," Rachel began. "Jenny and I have been reviewing your recent work, and we wanted to discuss your progress on the performance improvement plan." "The good news," Jenny interjected, "is that your last 3 proposals were much more aligned with our standard methodologies. Clean, efficient, and deliverable within our timelines. The concern," Rachel continued, "is whether this represents a genuine shift in your working style or simply compliance during the evaluation period. Our worry is that without ongoing supervision, you might revert to the analytical patterns that created the initial issues." I set my folder on the conference table. "Before we discuss my future working style, I thought you might want to see the results from the campaigns you considered problematic." Rachel's eyebrows rose slightly. "Of course, we always welcome performance data." I opened the folder and slid the first page across the table. Milagros Restaurant Group saw a 340% increase in off-peak revenue and is now expanding their business model based on insights from our campaign. Jenny's expression shifted from confident to confused. "I'm sorry, what? The campaign you said was overcomplicated because it positioned them as a productivity sanctuary instead of just promoting food? It turns out people were already using their spaces for work. We just helped them embrace what was already happening." I slid the next page across. FitConnect app saw 180% improvement in user retention and 220% increase in conversions with the social accountability campaign. They're now pivoting their entire product strategy around community features. "But you were supposed to promote their existing features," Jenny said. "I promoted their most successful features, the ones buried in their interface that nobody was finding. The campaign didn't create new behavior, it amplified behavior that was already working." The third page hit the table with a soft sound that felt like a gavel. Confidence Boutique increased online sales by 290% with messaging that connected clothing to emotional outcomes instead of just product features. They're restructuring their entire brand identity around confidence building rather than fashion trends. Rachel leaned back in her chair, the same way she had during our first meeting. But this time, the silence felt different. Less like judgment, more like recalculation. "These results are certainly impressive," she said carefully. "But they also reinforce our concern about consistency. We can't guarantee that every client will respond positively to unconventional approaches." "Actually, you can," I said, opening my laptop. "Because unconventional approaches aren't really unconventional anymore." I turned the screen toward them, displaying a news article from Marketing Land dated 3 days ago. McKinsey study reveals, behavioral analytics campaigns outperform traditional approaches by 300%, the methodologies you've been calling overthinking? McKinsey is now recommending them as industry best practice for Fortune 500 companies. Jenny reached for the laptop, scrolling through the article. "This says precision behavioral targeting will become the standard approach within 18 months. It also says that agencies without behavioral analytics capabilities will lose market share to competitors who can deliver psychologically targeted campaigns." I clicked to another tab. Adage published a similar piece last week. Harvard Business Review had one 2 weeks ago. "The industry is moving toward deep behavioral analysis whether we participate or not." Rachel was quiet for a long moment, staring at the laptop screen. Finally, she spoke. "Sarah, these results are undeniably impressive. And if you're right about the industry trend, then Pinnacle needs to decide whether we want to be ahead of the curve or behind it. But we also need to consider team dynamics," Jenny added. "Even if your approaches are effective, we can't have other team members feeling like their work isn't sophisticated enough. What if sophistication became the expectation instead of the exception?" I asked. What if instead of asking me to think less, we helped the team think more? The room went quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. Through the glass wall, I could see the open office where my colleagues were working on campaigns, using methodologies that would be obsolete within 2 years. What exactly are you proposing? Rachel asked. I'm proposing that Pinnacle become the agency that other agencies are trying to catch up to. Instead of following industry trends, we set them. Instead of delivering good enough campaigns, we deliver campaigns that redefine what clients expect from their marketing partners. I closed my laptop and leaned forward. The results speak for themselves. 3 clients, 3 campaigns that exceeded expectations by understanding behavior instead of assuming it. McKinsey is charging Fortune 500 companies millions for the same insights we're treating as overthinking. And you believe you could help develop these capabilities across the team? I believe the team already has these capabilities. They just need permission to use them. Rachel exchanged a look with Jenny that lasted several seconds. Corporate telepathy in action. Sarah, we're going to table the performance improvement plan while we reassess our strategic direction, Rachel said. I want you to put together a presentation for the leadership team about implementing behavioral analytics as a core service offering. You want me to present my overthinking to leadership? A smile flickered across Rachel's face, the first genuine one I'd seen from her. I want you to present the future of our industry to people who need to decide whether we're going to be part of it. That afternoon, I called Marcus. How's the corporate efficiency boot camp going? He asked. It just got promoted to strategic initiative. Ah, the classic corporate pivot. We weren't wrong about your ideas, we were just early in recognizing their value. Something like that. They want me to present behavioral analytics to leadership as a new service offering. That's fantastic. Want some advice? Always. Don't present it as a new idea. Present it as catching up to where the market is heading. Make it clear that this isn't about being innovative, it's about not being left behind. Fear-based selling instead of vision-based selling? Exactly. Corporate leaders are much more motivated by the fear of losing market share than by the excitement of gaining competitive advantage. I spent the weekend preparing a presentation that would have been impossible 6 weeks ago. Not because the content was different, but because the context was. 6 weeks ago, I was defending my analytical approach against accusations of overthinking. Now I was positioning it as essential business strategy. The presentation opened with a simple question: what's the cost of being wrong about your customers? From there, I walked through the industry data Marcus had shown me, the declining effectiveness of traditional campaigns, the rising costs of customer acquisition, and the competitive threat from agencies that were already implementing behavioral analytics. Then came the case studies. Milagros Restaurant Group's business model transformation. FitConnect's user retention breakthrough. Confidence Boutique's sales explosion. Each one demonstrated not just improved metrics, but fundamental shifts in how clients understood their own value propositions. The final slides outlined implementation, training programs for existing staff, new hiring criteria for analytical roles, client education about behavioral targeting benefits, and competitive positioning that would establish Pinnacle as the behavioral analytics leader in Chicago's marketing scene. I practiced the presentation in my apartment until I could deliver it without slides, timing each section to build momentum toward the inevitable conclusion. Pinnacle could either lead the industry transition or be disrupted by it. Monday morning arrived with the kind of Chicago autumn clarity that makes you believe in new possibilities. The leadership team gathered in the largest conference room. Rachel, 3 other VPs, and CEO Patricia Washington, who normally delegated these meetings but had apparently decided this one warranted her attention. Sarah, Rachel tells me you have some insights about industry trends that might affect our strategic direction, Patricia said. We're interested in hearing your perspective. Perspective. Such a carefully neutral word. Not proposal or recommendation, just perspective. Corporate leaders protecting themselves from having to make decisions before they understood the implications. What I have, I said, is data about why our industry is failing its clients, and a solution that Pinnacle is uniquely positioned to provide. I clicked to the first slide: customer acquisition costs across industries, all trending upward at unsustainable rates. Traditional marketing approaches are becoming less effective every quarter, but most agencies are responding by doing the same things harder instead of doing different things better. The next slide showed conversion rate declines for standard campaign approaches. Consumers aren't responding to broad demographic targeting anymore. They want personalized experiences that feel individually relevant, not mass-produced messaging that mentions their age group. Patricia leaned forward. And you believe behavioral analytics is the solution? I believe behavioral analytics is the only solution that's actually working. I clicked to the McKinsey study results. Companies that implement precision behavioral targeting are seeing 300% better performance than traditional approaches. But implementing behavioral analytics requires significant investment in training and talent acquisition, one of the VPs noted. How do we know the ROI justifies the cost? I clicked to my case study slides. Because we've already proven it. Works. 3 campaigns, 3 clients who saw results that exceeded their expectations by understanding psychological triggers instead of just demographic data. I walked through each case study, emphasizing not just the metrics but the business transformation each client experienced. How understanding customer behavior had revealed new opportunities, new markets, new ways of thinking about their own value propositions. The question isn't whether behavioral analytics works, I concluded. The question is whether Pinnacle wants to be the agency that other agencies hire when they need behavioral analytics expertise, or the agency that loses clients to competitors who understand their customers better than we do. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Patricia asked the question I'd been waiting for: what would implementation look like? I outlined the training programs, hiring strategies, and client education initiatives that would transform Pinnacle from a traditional agency into a behavioral analytics leader. The timeline was aggressive but achievable: 6 months to full implementation, with early wins possible within 8 weeks. The competitive advantage window is closing, I said. McKinsey's report goes public next month. Once Fortune 500 companies start demanding behavioral analytics, every agency will be scrambling to catch up. We have the opportunity to be ready before they realize they need us. Patricia closed her notebook and looked around the table. I want to see a full implementation proposal by Friday. Budget, timeline, staffing requirements, and client transition strategy. As the meeting ended and people filed out, Rachel approached me. That was well done, she said. Very thorough. The word that had once felt like criticism now sounded like recognition. 6 weeks ago, you put me on a PIP for overthinking, I said. Now you want me to teach the company how to think more systematically about client behavior. 6 weeks ago, I thought efficiency was more important than effectiveness, Rachel replied. Turns out I was optimizing for the wrong variable. That evening, I sat in my apartment with my laptop open to a blank document titled Pinnacle Behavioral Analytics Implementation Plan. Outside my window, Chicago's evening lights reminded me that transformation happened one decision at a time, one building at a time, one person willing to think differently at a time. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, heard through the grapevine that Pinnacle is making some strategic moves. Still interested in that McKinsey position? I looked at the blank document, at the opportunity to build something new within an existing structure rather than starting over somewhere else. To prove that change was possible, that overthinking could become strategic thinking, that depth didn't have to be sacrificed for speed. I typed back, thanks, but I think I'm exactly where I need to be. The implementation plan wouldn't write itself, but for the first time in weeks, I was excited about the thinking it would require. 3 months later, the same conference room where I'd received my performance improvement plan had been transformed into Pinnacle's Behavioral Analytics Training Center. Whiteboards covered every wall, filled with psychological frameworks, consumer behavior models, and statistical analysis methodologies that would have been considered overthinking not long ago. I stood at the front of the room, facing 12 team members who were about to spend the next 2 weeks learning to think like behavioral analysts instead of traditional marketers. Jenny sat in the second row, notebook open, the same focused expression she'd once reserved for critiquing my overcomplicated approaches. Who can tell me the difference between demographic targeting and behavioral targeting? I asked Marcus. Thompson, a creative director who joined us from a traditional agency, raised his hand. Demographics tell you who someone is. Behavior tells you why they make decisions. Exactly. And why does that matter for campaign effectiveness? Because people don't buy products because of their age or income level, said Lisa Park, our newest hire fresh from Northwestern's psychology program. They buy products because of how those products make them feel or what problems they solve. The transformation hadn't been seamless. Implementing behavioral analytics across Pinnacle's client base had required retraining staff, educating clients, and fundamentally changing how we approached every campaign. But the results had been impossible to ignore. Our client retention rate had increased by 85%. New business inquiries had doubled. Industry publications were writing about Pinnacle's innovative approach to consumer psychology, and competitors were starting to poach our talent to try to replicate our methodologies. Let's look at a real example, I said, clicking to a slide showing our latest case study. Thompson & Associates law firm wanted to increase consultations for estate planning services. Traditional approach would target people over 50 with messaging about wills and financial security. But what did the behavioral analysis reveal? I asked. That people don't plan estates because they're thinking about death, Lisa answered. They plan estates because they want to protect the people they love. Right. So instead of targeting age demographics with mortality-focused messaging, we targeted emotional triggers with protection-focused messaging. The campaign tagline was "Love is the ultimate legacy." Results? The slide showed a 420% increase in consultation requests and a 67% increase in retained clients. More importantly, the client testimonials weren't about legal services, they were about peace of mind, family security, and the emotional relief of knowing loved ones would be protected. This is what behavioral analytics looks like in practice. I continued. We're not just changing what we say to customers, we're changing how we understand what customers actually need. After the training session, Rachel found me in the break room. How are you feeling about leading the new behavioral analytics division? The promotion had been announced the previous week, along with my new title, Director of Behavioral Strategy. It came with a team of 8 analysts, a dedicated budget for psychological research tools, and the authority to implement behavioral frameworks across all client accounts. It feels like overthinking with a better job title, I said. Rachel laughed. Sound I'd never heard from her before. The looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.